Hello everyone. Instead of trying to type all of this up, I thought this week I might do a little video of going through how you would do the project. This way you get to hear my voice and see that it does not match my face. And you also get to hear what I sound like and know that when I'm teaching I generally kind of do it a little bit off the cuff. So that's where you'll hear me hem and haw at times when I'm doing this and pause and stop and think about what I'm going to say. I don't have a strict script for this because I think that's kind of the natural part of teaching. So I was going to use my topic of artificial intelligence, which I used at the beginning of the term, to show you how to work your way through this project. And I just used the template from the module 6, the week 6 module there. And this is the PowerPoint one, so there's nothing fancy with this. I'm not looking for you to do anything fancy, but I thought it would help illustrate what you've got to do for the project. So for the first slide is going to be the title slide. In here you can see I'm doing artificial intelligence, humanities, and natural sciences. Those are the two lenses I do. You fill in the date and your name of the project. So that's the first one. That's straightforward. The next one is the introduction slide, and you're going to introduce the topic that you're going to talk about. So it's one of those 3 topics you've been working on. You're not changing the topic, but now you can narrow it down to the 2 lenses. So you see what I'm doing is the topic of artificial intelligence, and I'm going to look at it from the perspective of humanities. Then my background's philosophy, so it's easy for me to think of that way, and natural science. And I picked those 2. They're kind of different than what the other sampler, the exemplar, they gave you for this project to look at. And so once you've stated what the project is, then you're going to explain why you chose it. And I've always been kind of a science fiction geek. Nobody would know that because I was an athlete in school. I was individual sports, so track, swimming, that type of thing. But I was an athlete, and nobody would know that that was my background. But so I'm a kind of closet that way. And I've always wondered about the nature of consciousness in terms of what it means to mind. So you want to put your description down there. Some of this should come out of the discussions, which makes this project nice. You're incorporating quite a few things from past work. So the next slide you're going to do is you're going to talk about the topic in the lenses, the first lens. And in this, you want to give some details about the topic and try to illustrate those as much as possible. Sorry, I'm trying to get a little more comfortable. And then explain how your topic's viewed through the lens. So in this case, what my articles, when I was doing them, they talked about the history a little bit of mind and consciousness, and that it goes way back to the ancient Greeks. Plato talks about the soul being reborn into a body. So the idea of mind and consciousness can be traced at least that far back. But the 2 main articles I had from the humanities perspective were by Alan Turing and John Searle. So I want to give some details about them. These are the 2 leading areas and proponents that are known in the humanities and philosophy in particular that talk about this. If you've seen The Imitation Game, the movie's about Alan Turing. He's the one who made the Enigma computer that broke the Germans' code in World War II. So he was of the opinion that we can have artificial intelligence, that machines would be able to fool people into thinking it was a person answering a question. He didn't think he could do it in his time, but he thought eventually they could. Searle says, well, describes what he calls weak artificial intelligence. And he says that we can probably do, but strong artificial intelligence is where machines would have cognitive states. So I'm giving some details about those articles is what I want to do here. Then when I can start looking at the lens itself. So that last section here is about how humanities is dealing with the expressions of human experience. And in philosophy, it's those arguments we've got that try to address this experience. And in particular with artificial intelligence, it's what is it that we as humans experience when we're talking about cognition and artificial intelligence and intelligence in general. So that's where that lens is taking that perspective. Then the next slide is going to be same exact thing. You provide some details, some examples, specifics in there, but then you talk about it, what that second lens looks at. So in my case, I'm looking at natural science, and I include computer science in this. That's closer to natural science. But natural science comes into play because if we're trying to create artificial intelligence, one of the things we need is neurobiology. So it's one of those hard sciences. And this is where I found an article on IBM is or did create a computer that they claimed matches the neural capacity of a cat. Haven't been able to get as much as a human being yet, but they're up to that level. This was a few years ago, so they're probably further along in this process now. But what's unique about this is they said the chips they're creating now mimic human perception, action, and cognition, which is different than just being able to do calculations. So in order to do this, though, why we look at it through the natural science lens is that we're looking at these physical properties that go in with these cognitive states. So you have to understand those in order to be able to replicate them into the computer science realm. So that gives a different lens of looking at the question of artificial intelligence. So that's what these two slides are doing, is how do you talk about your topic, not only the details that come from the articles, but then how do the lenses look at those, and so that you can start to contrast them. So the next slide is going to be the convergence and divergence, and you'll notice that I've kept the titles on these slides. It's perfectly fine. You don't have to change anything around. And my wording will be a little different when I talk about them or when I write things, but I've left the titles the same. So the first thing you want to do is, how are these two lenses similar? And this comes back from previous discussions we've had in class, so you can start to draw out some of that material you've done. So when you look at this, humanities and natural sciences, what I notice is they're both focusing on the nature of human cognition. They do it in different ways, but that's what they're talking about when they're talking about artificial intelligence. And they're also discussing how and whether this can be replicated. So whereas natural science really thinks it can be, there's the debate then in philosophy, but it is about the replication of human intelligence and artificially creating that. Then you got to discuss how they are different, how they diverge. And I've got a couple differences. The slide says 2, so make sure you've got at least 2 similarities and 2 differences. For me, the humanities lens, and I focused on this, it's the experience that we have and whether that experience of cognitive states can really be replicated. Whereas natural sciences, they're looking at it in terms of the physical processes and the functional role that computers play. Can we make those things similar enough to say that a machine has artificial intelligence? Now, once you've done that, you want to summarize this and say, what is it about this topic? When you look at this topic from these different lenses, what do you see? And what I really notice is that in the humanities, we're talking about a qualitative experiential perspective. It's what's the experience people have when they're talking about a topic. Whereas in the physical sciences and the natural sciences, it's about those quantitative, in those measurable, observable physical properties that go on that we're talking about. So they do have different ways of looking at it, but they get intertwined as they go along. So you want to clarify how they are similar in that way. Then the next slide is going to be your next steps. What is it you're looking for? What do you want to further your explanation, which is the most recent discussion. We started to discuss that. And here you're going to want to look at a couple of the questions that you didn't get information for from the articles, and then identify where the key words are that you're going to use this. This is the previous project. You're now integrating that step into it. So my next step would be to look at what computer programs are they creating? How do they make them to say they're artificial intelligence? And since I don't know a lot about programming, that's one of the things I would want to look into. Now, in my articles, they don't really talk about the types of machines. I know there's robots out there, so this leads me to the keywords. I want to know about robots and computers and artificial intelligence. That would give me that direction to look at. And those are the keywords I would use. Now, as a philosopher, one of the areas we look at is ethics. So that's another question I had initially. Is it really worth pursuing this? There's a huge debate over this. Stephen Hawking, Elon Musk, who does Tesla and the rockets, they all say it's bad, but there's other people who say it's good and we should continue to work on artificial intelligence. So that's a question. The articles that I had did not address it, but I would look at ethics and artificial intelligence. So you're going to prepare your next steps here. And then the final page, which this week you don't have to work on for your initial draft, is you need to put in your citations. So you're going to have to take those 2 articles that you're using for your topic and give me complete citations. If you have found another article that you found, put it in there. In this case, I had 3, so I put them in there. Make sure they're APA formatted, and you'll work on that. That's usually one of the last steps people do in research, is pull all of this together. So I won't be looking for it this week. But that's the whole project. You can see I'll post this example up there so you have a second example of which to work from and to illustrate what you're doing.